Welcome to our SF Debris Blue Channel Christmas show, where instead of looking at something awful, this year we're going to take a look at a classic, the original Planet of the Apes film. To forewarn, this will be about 1 part silliness to 3 parts seriousness. Normally I've been keeping the silliness on the red channel, but it's Christmas, I'm going to indulge a little bit. So let's jump right into the film. We kick off with Charlton Heston as George Taylor, the only one awake on board as the ship is heading on a long journey, at such a high rate of speed that relativity means that 700 years have already passed back home. Hope you took care of that faucet drip before you left. Despite the fact that everyone he ever knew back home is long dead, Taylor is upbeat even as he reflects upon this fact. Life goes on and all of that. Taylor has no attachment to the past. Leaving Earth behind? No emotional impact whatsoever. We get a glimpse of why.
Does man, that marvel of the universe, that glorious paradox who sent me to the stars, still make war against his brother? Keep his neighbor's children starving?
Taylor finally goes to sleep and the titles can begin. From the get-go, we have a taste of Jerry Goldsmith's approach to the soundtrack, and it is very effective. Just a wonderful atmosphere-setting piece for the titles, anticipating the discordant world to come. Now, while it's a virtual certainty that if you're watching this, you have seen the movie and know the twist ending, I'll mostly look at this as it was intended to be experienced by the audience for the first time. So after the titles, we have a gut-twisting POV of the rocket coming in to crash land on a planet, and based on the title, you can probably guess whose planet it is. This was a late compromise in the film production. The intended shots for the crash never worked out, so this wasn't an artistic choice so much as a trying their best to sell it. They just needed to convincingly get the damn rocket into the water in order to avoid losing the audience. The sleep capsules open, but one of the 4, Stewart, the female member of the crew, had a cracked seal and died long ago. But at least has an impromptu burial at sea lined up. The 3 survivors try to deal with their situation before they sink, but it looks bad. Fortunately, they learn the atmosphere is safe for them out there, so with little hope of stopping the flooding, they finally leave, and that's the end of the USS Gus Grissom. Before leaving, Taylor finds out that the date back on Earth is November 25th, 3978, which is great. It means this is the weekend. We can take the rest of the day off. Keep in mind that this film was made while we were working to beat the Russians to the moon. We learned a lot about the perils of trying to survive in space by then. Astronauts were rock stars to a lot of the public, and popular films of the time showed their heroism. Robinson Crusoe on Mars, Countdown, Marooned, and of course, 2001: A Space Odyssey, which we'll look at in the coming year. So these aren't just explorers that we're seeing. These are heroes in the minds of the audience, bravely facing the uncertainty of a one-way trip to a planet that may have poisonous food or water. So when they start talking about the failure that led to their water landing and the lack of time to properly examine the information before power was lost, this is more about the practicality of their situation rather than whining that things have gone wrong. I mean, look at me. I whinge if I have to wait for a railroad crossing. Taylor fills them in on the situation, though.
Still can't accept it. Time's wiped out everything you ever knew. It's all dust.
Don't sugarcoat it, Taylor. Give it to us straight. He greets news that they can't grow food in this area with simple acceptance, and that's vital to note. Taylor's not getting bogged down by emotions that would only distract him. No worry, no fear, no anxiety. They have to deal with the problem that is in front of them. They may be facing a slow death, or they might find a way to survive, but whatever will happen will happen. We're going to try to survive. But if not, getting upset won't change anything. If anyone is psychologically equipped to handle whatever this planet can throw at them, it's George Taylor. Appearances notwithstanding. Taylor is, especially now, so resigned to whatever the situation might be that to expend energy on the empty symbolic act of planting the American flag on this planet is hilariously out of step to their reality. Taylor's a man of practicality and reason. He intends to survive, but it will be through the use of mind over matter, an essential point for what's to come. The way is harrowing. Rocky mesas, hazardous sands, even a loose boulder at one point. Plus, water is running out. But Taylor remains focused, even when Landon continues to be bothered.
There is just one reality left. We are here and it is now. You get hold of that and hang on to it, or you might as well be dead.
When Landon tries to stand up for himself by saying that he's prepared to die, Taylor just laughs and says, "Chalk another one up for the human spirit." I may be belaboring the point, but this is such an essential part of Taylor's character that it's important to understand, especially because he comes across like a real jerk towards Landon. He harangues him about coming on this mission to the point that we get the hint he probably didn't want him here because he was coming for all of the wrong reasons, and now they're stuck here with someone not mentally equipped for the situation. Landon has been the least productive member of the trio ever since they left that rocket. Although I'm sure if you asked Taylor, he would put Stewart above even him. At least she's not a drain on their resources. But this is a life or death situation, and nothing else matters. Taylor has no patience for someone who does not have their head in the game. Taylor's not a cynic. He's a true realist. He intends to survive aware of the odds, but he will not be defeated by the odds. If we are to survive, it will be through commitment and intelligence, not succumbing to emotions and instincts. But Landon is stuck with a useless old way of thinking, and Taylor holds that in contempt. The reason we can infer is because Landon looks at himself as trying to be the pinnacle of humanity, and Taylor is unimpressed with humanity. He thinks there's got to be something better in the universe than us. Let's see how well that turns out for him. Dodge soon finds a single plant, but it is proof of life on this planet, and as they continue, we get a brief glimpse of someone watching them from the cliffs above. Soon, there's the horrifying sight of stuff on the rocks, some kind of scarecrow to stop the birds from eating all their gravel. But once they reach the top, Taylor spots what really matters, a waterfall, which means almost certainly fresh water for drinking and for relief after their difficult journey. And the good news is, they found something very much like humans based on the footprints. The bad news is, they found something very much like humans because they steal all their stuff. They managed to barely recover enough stuff to at least cover themselves so that they're not heading through the alien planet with everything just hanging out the whole time. Not really in keeping with the whole heroic astronaut look, is it? That's one small step for man, one giant dick joke for guy kind. The locals are quite clearly primitive humans of some kind, although it does mean the food is probably compatible with their biology then. But at the sound of some kind of horn, the natives go running off in a panic, and our heroes quickly join them. But we soon spot the nightmare creature that is approaching us, a fusion of beast and man, yes? No, it's not that bad. Yes, it's 8 men on horseback brandishing rifles. Our astronauts may not have spent lives being hunted like this, but they clearly have superior intelligence in their ability to evade many of the traps that nab the natives. Admittedly, it is hard to outsmart a bullet. Taylor eventually is shot in the throat and is collected by the Apes and brought back to their hunting camp. The Apes have other examples of 19th and 20th century technology, and they can speak English.
Smile.
If hunting humans is also your honeymoon, you might be a red bud. Taylor is fortunate one way, though, because later on some of the apes give him medical treatments to survive, thanks in part to a blood transfusion. But now he's there to hear something that surely must make him think this is all a bad dream. The apes complaining about procedures and organizational politics. He's traveled over 300 light years in the hopes of finding something better than man, and he's found the same thing that he left behind. What makes this unbearable situation worse is that the wound has damaged his ability to speak, so to the apes he's just another of the mute natives.
He keeps pretending he can talk.
He's very convincing. I'd almost think he was some kind of actor. You can see why the makeup was so essential to the film's success. It depends so much on making the craziness of this ape society believable. Schaffner gave Chambers huge authority in the production to ensure that the audience would buy it, up to and including allowing him to immediately cease shooting if he felt something needed to be corrected with the makeup. He also ensured consistency by developing a paint-by-numbers approach for the makeup to ensure that none of the other artists got any ideas of putting their own signature on things. Each had to look similar, or else it wouldn't sell the society. One of the apes, Dr. Zira, is an animal psychologist and calls him Bright Eyes because of how intelligent he seems for a human. In fact, she shows him off to the big swinging chimp around here, Dr. Zaius. Actually, he's an orangutan, while Zira is a chimpanzee and the cage keeper is a gorilla. Well, Zaius is a tough crowd. Everything Zira points out that's remarkable about Bright Eyes, he shoots down as unimpressive. It's like if he actually showed him humanity built the Eiffel Tower, he'd just say, well, why isn't it finished yet? Zaius sees humans as a nuisance with no scientific value besides what could be learned from experimental brain surgery, so suffice to say, he is not sympathetic towards our hero. Zira, on the other hand, is so appreciative she gives Taylor a gift. A girl. To be his friend, I'm sure. Well, Taylor's outside in the pen right now. I guess everybody in this prison gets time in the yard. Zira swings by. She comes by. I suppose when we're dealing with apes, I have to be a little bit more specific with my verbs. And she brings along her companion, Cornelius. Taylor hopes that this might be his chance, so he writes a message in the dirt to try to communicate with them. Except Nova, the girl, rubs it out while everyone is busy talking to Dr. Zaius about Cornelius's archaeology work. By the time he gets their attention, another human is joining in, wiping away the words, and things get out of hand. It leads to a fight, and it winds up with Taylor being dragged off by the neck. Hell is other people, that's for sure. But one notable thing does happen here. When everyone else is gone, Dr. Zaius spots what remains of the writing. He's aghast and brushes that away. The quickness of his reaction indicates this is not someone horrified by the implication, because that would take a little while to sink in, but rather it's a recognition that there is suddenly a dangerous thing here and must be quickly expunged. Remember this, it's the first hint that he knows what's going on and is covering it up. Inside, Zira is horrified at Bright Eyes' treatment, but it allows him to take advantage of the situation and grab the pencil and the paper off of her. Now, he gets a beating for this, but it does give him a brief chance to write a message that his name is, in fact, Taylor. Well, we're going to have to keep this a secret for sure. Otherwise, we'll have to change all the merchandising out in the gift shop. She has him brought to an office to show to Cornelius what he can do. But he's skeptical, despite Taylor being able to communicate and even demonstrate ideas beyond their science, like gliding to remain airborne. But while Cornelius has radical ideas about the development of ape kind of this world, the fact that they're considered heresy has made him far more skittish than Zira, who is willing to toss out their religion if science says that it's false. But they're up against a very entrenched society here. You can tell by the temperature change in the room when Dr. Zaius, Maximus, and others enter.
What is this?
For any of us, this would be degrading. But now keep in mind Taylor's personality. He faces any crisis, no matter how insurmountable, with practicality and reason, ignoring instincts and lower emotions that will interfere, and remain focused upon thinking through any obstacles and then carrying them out rationally. To take a man who is so committed to leaving any dregs of primitive animal in himself behind for clear-headed intelligence, and then treat him like a beast, is an affront to his very sense of self. This is dangerous for the apes, actually. If you treat someone like an animal, sooner or later they will act like an animal. Things are about to get worse for Taylor. He overhears that Dr. Zaius has ordered that he be castrated, and all he came in for was a shave. He makes a break for it, met with horror by all the apes who see the escaped animal running free. It gets really bad when a kid spots him, although This is even worse because it's the middle of a funeral. That's probably not going to make this moment of heartbreak much easier for them. Well, Taylor puts up a good fight, effectively evading them for some time, although there's a horrifying moment when he discovers Dodge, having been taxidermized and put into a museum. But eventually he gets recaptured due to sheer force of numbers, but by now his throat is healed and he can finally give voice to his feelings.
Get your stinking paws off me, you damn dirty ape!
Even the human thinks you need a shower. Now do you believe me, Carl? When we next see Taylor, the apes take Nova away from him and use a fire hose to keep him contained. That looks bad. I don't know why he doesn't face the wall there. Come on, turn around, Bright Eyes. Jeez, this guy. Every now and then he falls apart. But seriously, though, the hose combined with the taunts of the gorilla were a clear reference to the groundbreaking incident in the civil rights movement, when a horrified nation watched a nonviolent protest in Birmingham being broken up using high-pressure fire hoses. A wake-up call to the grotesque injustices being perpetrated by governmental authority. Planet of the Apes is most overtly about a society that is unjust to humans, yes, but it also subtly shows this is a society that oppresses its own as well. Taylor has to laugh at the madness of the situation to Nova. The man who thought himself too good for humanity now wishes for companionship more than almost anything. The Society of the Apes is naturally meant to represent our own. The chimpanzees are the middle class, the orangutans are the ruling class, and the gorillas are the police and military. Actions like these are meant as a commentary on the police as the tools of racist oppression. Not going to hear that in many Christmas shows today, are you? The baboons are meant to be the lower class, but were not included because it was too difficult to believably turn them into ape men, which wound up costing us a gag that had been planned. During the escape attempt, Taylor was supposed to run into baboons with picket signs reading things like, "Baboons Unite." Taylor is being taken away for trial, stripped of all dignity and called an animal. The tribunal concludes that whatever nitpicking Cornelius wants to try to do about whether or not one should consider Taylor a man, he is most definitely not an ape, and therefore has no rights. But Zira turns that around, that he can't very well be accused of a crime against the law then, if he is not recognized by the law. But really, they've already made up their minds. This is a show trial, nothing more. And they silence Taylor when he tries to speak. As I mentioned in the companion video, Wilson was on the blacklist, so you can imagine where he drew inspiration for this scene. Taylor is finally given permission to speak, but only when Zira asserts that he can think and reason. This is just to prove that he doesn't know specific facets of ape culture as some kind of demonstration that he can't think, despite the fact that he can articulate ideas and could answer anything that's not, well, local trivia. His explanation for how he came to be on this world is dismissed as absurdity, but things take a nightmarish turn as they say, if it were true, then one of the other humans would be like him. And sure enough, there's Landon, only... I'm not a doctor, but there is nothing about that looks good. Landon has been so altered that he appears no different than the native humans, although he is likely even worse off. Even the locals probably had some reasoning capability that he would probably be lacking now. There's a big difference between having a less advanced brain and having parts of your brain actually removed. Taylor, outraged, knows that Dr. Zaius did this, and did it knowing what Landon was, purely for the sake of his own agenda. He tries to attack Dr. Zaius, and you can imagine how well that goes, and after being dragged back, as Cornelius and Zira present their arguments, the trio of orangutans adopt the see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil poses. It's a visual joke, ad-libbed on the day, but it also is indicative of their mindset. The two on the left will not accept anything that is offered, and Dr. Zaius will not speak the heresy that he knows to be true. When Zira and Cornelius try to argue that he must come from the Forbidden Zone, and therefore must be some kind of human throwback to a time when they could still speak, that just gets them into trouble too. Yet after the trial is over, Taylor is brought in to see Dr. Zaius in private, who freely admits that this was a kangaroo court, with orangutans, of course, because kangaroos would make it ridiculous. He says Taylor's future is entirely in his hands. If he has his way, it'll be castration and experimental brain surgery. But if he were to tell Dr. Zaius the truth, he could forget all about that. Taylor insists that there is no such tribe that he knows of. He's telling the truth. He came from outer space. But Dr. Zaius doesn't believe it. He says if there's one mutant, there's probably a whole tribe of them out there. That would explain why Landon was the way he does, and how his other companion was probably one too, and that they are a problem for Dr. Zaius because, you see, and he doesn't mention this yet, he knows the true history of his planet, that humans were once the dominant species, that there was an atomic war that devastated the planet, and that in the time that followed, mankind descended and apekind evolved. The reason they act in ways that are similar to humans, the reason that they speak English as their language, is literally monkey see, monkey do. The apes' ancestors mimicked humans so that when the time came, they essentially slipped into their lives. Dr. Zaius is less concerned about the purity of their faith than the fear of what Taylor represents. No, not to the truth, although that would be bad, but the existence of humans at the height of their mental fortitude, because humans are brutal creatures of war. The obstacles to progress, the reasons that the apes live a largely agrarian society despite their scientific knowledge and fine tools, is to ensure that apes never attain the capacity for self-destruction that humans did. That will ensure the world doesn't suffer another catastrophic war that could doom them. Anyone who has seen the sequel is no doubt laughing right now. Zira sends her nephew to break Taylor out, but Taylor insists on bringing Nova. Nova may originally have been given to him as a present, but it's quite clear that she's come to mean far more to him. After all, she is the one who ultimately saved his life. It was her blood during the transfusion that brought him back. And during this time, she showed that she cares for him, wants to be with him. And even if he didn't love her, and I think it's safe to say he does, he needs companionship. We all do. Remember his reaction when he saw Landon at first, thinking that he was all right? Remember, he could barely tolerate Landon much of the time. But finding out that he wasn't alone here, he was overjoyed at the thought of having his companionship. Think about that. Think about the person at work that you barely tolerate. Imagine being trapped somewhere with them and being overjoyed at that thought. That's how bad things have gotten. That's how much he needs human companionship. Zira is helping, but doesn't quite realize that he needs to bring Nova along. He can meet all of his physical needs out there, but without being able to meet the emotional needs, the needs that social creatures like humans have to be among our own, at least to some degree, you'll die just the same. Eventually they meet up with Zira, who takes them to a rendezvous with Cornelius, who has horses, supplies, and best of all for Taylor, firearms, so he won't get captured again. You can be sure that the castration wouldn't be done with anesthetic.
Now look here, Taylor, I'm in charge of this expedition.
Good for you.
But the only way you can have this is if you pry it from my cold, dead hands. Cornelius and Zira need to return to his excavation to find evidence to prove their innocence of the charges made against them during the trial. So they're all heading the same direction and will travel together. After Taylor gives himself the first clean shave after 2,000 years, Cornelius shows him the cave that he had previously been excavating. But before we can look inside, the apes show up. They'd been following them. And when snipers get into position, Taylor threatens to shoot Dr. Zaius himself, knowing that the orangutan will take that seriously because of his view of humanity. He even showed contempt for Taylor earlier, claiming to be from Fort Wayne, Indiana, as Fort implied the military mindset of man. There is an argument over Cornelius's heresy and treason, but Taylor finally persuades Dr. Zaius to at least look at the findings to prove that he's also a scientist as much as a supporter of the faith. Cornelius shows the artifacts and the paradox that they represent. Things get more primitive as you go into the past, until finally they become more advanced and inexplicable. Included is a human doll, on a level where no ape bones could be found. Dr. Zaius naturally dismisses all of this, but Taylor starts showing what all these artifacts are that they can't identify. Items to help a man with failing health. All signs that the being Dr. Zaius sees as a killing machine is actually physically weak. But the greatest proof of all comes thanks to Nova, who plays with the doll until it says, Mama. And this is undeniable. The one thing the apes, with their loathing of humans, would never do would be to make a human doll capable of speech. Well, there's an ambush while they're in there, but Taylor lures Dr. Zaius out to use as a hostage, to drive the gorillas back and to get supplies. But when gloating over his tied-up hostage about man being here first, that all the apes have they owe to man, Dr. Zaius gets the last laugh by reading a special scroll, kept hidden, warning about man, about his misdeeds, willingness to kill without reasons, willingness to turn on his own. And with each remark, Taylor is reminded of why he wanted to leave Earth in the first place. He came looking for something better, and he didn't find it. But what he found didn't vindicate mankind either. So he and Nova head off after Dr. Zaius affirms that he has long feared the return of man in his previous form, with all the brutality that this means.
A planet where apes evolved from men? There's got to be an answer.
Don't look for it, Taylor. You may not like what you find.
Dr. Zaius allows them to go, possibly as a final victory over Taylor's insistence on the civility and wisdom of man, even as he declares the cave and all its contents are to be destroyed. Not because it is heresy, but because in his view, it is a threat to the future of his kind to ever learn of the society that came before theirs. The one that, as the iconic finale of the film shows,
You maniac! You blew it up! Oh, damn you! God damn you all to hell!
is so dangerous it cannot even be used as an object lesson for apes, because monkey see, monkey do. Planet of the Apes is fun, atmospheric, and clever. It's well-paced, full of great dialogue, and wonderfully shot. While definitely of its time, the film points to the development of New Hollywood and the many ways it bucks previous trends and pursues its own vision to storytelling, both in what is spoken and done, and what is left silent and still. Its themes were timely, but its message timeless. So long as we look on one another as enemies, we will remain the greatest threat to our own survival. Taylor left Earth because he thought he'd had enough of the human race. Yet before even going to sleep, in crept loneliness. When he saw the men of his time, or soon after destroyed themselves, he despairs how they failed to live up to what they could have been. Taylor is cynical of man because he wants them to be better, and is shown in grisly detail that they are not. The reveal of the ending was perfection. We see at first what appears to be more jagged rocks, but then we get the sense of something metallic in the close-up, with Taylor and Nova in the background looking up. The camera pans over to something that is now too regular to be natural, some kind of construction, but what could those radiating shapes be? That which prompts Taylor to collapse into despair that possibly exceeds even the worst moments in the pens of the apes. The silent revelation, then, of the statue, to confirm for the audience that this planet is Earth, to see what is meant to be a symbol of hope, to be the source of ultimate defeatism. And the final bitter irony is to realize, in retrospect, Dr. Zaius, despite being a despicable villain, also happens to be a despicable villain who was correct about almost everything, and even what he was wrong on, he was close to right. He thought Taylor was from a tribe of mutant throwbacks. That was wrong. But he was correct in insisting that Taylor came from this planet. Of course, what Dr. Zaius shows us is that the villain doesn't have to be wrong to be the villain, and also that being right does not make you not be the villain. Dr. Zaius may be right about many things, but that doesn't mean what he's doing is right. That image of the Statue of Liberty is a warning that we have embraced madness to have created the means to destroy ourselves. But in facing that, Dr. Zaius has embraced fear. The men who built those bombs, deployed those bombs, and detonated those bombs all thought they were doing the right thing, no doubt. All thought, my reasons alone are justification for my wicked actions. And in the desert that they made, no one cares about their reasons. Few even know they even acted. But that is also a reminder that saying our reasons justify any means is deadly. And yet that is the conclusion Dr. Zaius has reached. Maim an intelligent creature out of fear. Perpetuate lies out of fear. Condone violence out of fear. Punish the innocent out of fear. Destroy knowledge out of fear. Hold society back out of fear. Dr. Zaius is a cautionary tale of the person who knows what is right and on every side chooses wrong to advance it, with the same moral certitude that turned a paradise into glass. He is not the answer to man's destructiveness. He is the knee-jerk reaction to his destructiveness, and in so doing has stopped the apes from doing the one thing that allowed them to become the dominant life form on Earth: evolve into something better.